There it is.
All right, Spartan Savants fans, we've got a very special guest joining us this evening. Our colleague Chris from the OHIO podcast, that is the official Ohio State podcast of the College Huddle. Chris, I think you mentioned I was on earlier with you doing the preview for your show. I think you mentioned you were affiliated uh, with another entity. I just wanted to give you a chance to plug that before we got started.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only, like you said, are we the official Ohio State podcast of course, the College Huddle, we are also the official Buckeyes podcast of Scarlet and Game and the Fansided Network. So we are we're all over the place.
That's great. That's great. And yeah, I've for any of our Spartans fans out there that are interested in listening to the OHIO podcast, I've been following along. They do a great job. Some really great insight there at the OHIO podcast. But obviously, we're bringing Chris on to discuss the upcoming battle in East Lansing. Um, a big one for the Spartans here as they take on the highly ranked Ohio State, a team that many feel is the one of the favorites to win the national championship. A big offseason for Ohio State in terms of NIL and bringing in new players. But Chris, I wanted to start off and just get your thoughts here on kind of state of the union. You know, I think you mentioned it early on our show or your show. I'm sorry that obviously the teams that they have played is lackluster. But from what you can take away and what you've got from those games, wanted to get an idea of where the Buckeyes stand with you right now.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, it's a very interesting time to be a Buckeye fan. It really is. Because you look at this, we've gone out, we've assembled a great roster, of course, between getting guys out of the portal, such as Will Howard at quarterback, Quinshon Judkins. I mean, the guy is amazing. I didn't realize how good he was till we actually got him up there in Columbus. This guy's an absolute beast. Uh, we also went in there, we got Caleb Downs, Alabama's leading tackler from last year, just an absolute maniac in that defensive backfield. We went out and we got Alabama's former starting center, Seth McLaughlin. He's now in there taking snaps for us. Um, so we had some really big gets via the transfer portal. Not to mention a guy who's very likely our future in Julian Sayin, a guy who was the top-rated quarterback a couple years ago as he entered his freshman year. But then on top of that, we go out, we get Chip Kelly to come in and be the offensive coordinator. I cannot stress enough just how huge that was. He has completely changed the philosophy, the scheme for our run game, and that is going to be a monster thing. He is coaching to the strength of this offensive line, which is its athleticism at this point. So you're going to see a lot of polling, a lot of movement from our offensive guys. Just the linemen really getting out there and being more aggressive, which really benefits our the style of play of our guys. But then, we also had huge returns. And we can obviously thank NIL for this because you would have not have seen guys like Denzel Burke, JT Tuimuluau, Jack Sawyer, Donovan Jackson, who likely would have been, I would say, at least a day 2 pick off the offensive line. These guys all came back, along with Emeka Egbuka, who is one of the nation's best receivers. We go out and we get probably the best receiver. I personally think the best receiver in the nation right now in freshman Jeremiah Smith to come in as part of the freshman class. Ryan Day has assembled such a roster, such a coaching staff, and yet he's on the hot seat, guys. Don't let him fool you. This is a guy who's lost to our rival 3 years in a row. Not just our rival, your rival. 3 years in a row, he has lost that team. And call it what you will, whether it was by hook or by crook. The fact is, a win's a win, a loss is a loss. And if he goes out there and fails to beat those cheaters up north, If he goes out there and fails to make a deep run into the playoff, if not win a national championship, this season was a failure, and he may not be back next year. Even though he's a guy who comes in with an overall record of, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the exact number. Is it 59? 59 and 5?
Yeah, something crazy like that.
It's absurd. But 39 and 3 versus the Big Ten. 3 losses. That's it.
Yeah.
Versus the Big Ten. So it's really interesting. But to move on to this year's team, guys, we have so much to be excited about in Columbus. We've got an explosive offense. We've got a quarterback who can extend plays and run the ball, unlike our friend who bailed on us and went over to Syracuse. Little guy we like to call Honda McCord. We should have called him Hugo McCord because, let's face it, that guy just couldn't run. And he's a leader. He's a decision maker. The offensive line, like I said, looks more physically fit and more physical than it has in, at least 4 or 5 years. We've got guys out there being aggressive, and there's just a different mentality about this team. There is a calm confidence to this team. And one of the biggest things I've noticed this year is we've had some silly penalties. I mean, we've had, I believe we've had some silly penalties. I mean, it's 18 penalties on the year. We're averaging about 52 yards a game. But if you look at it, in the last game, we had, can we even call it a targeting call? Because that
I don't know anymore.
I could do a whole show on targeting by itself.
Yeah, like 2 of us.
Yeah. But we had the targeting call for 15. We had 3 kicks out of bounds. 3 kicks on the free kick to go out of bounds. We ended up running our second string kicker in there for the rest of the game because our starting kicker couldn't put the ball in the field of play. You take that away, we really had 1 penalty fee that whole game. This is a team that's playing more fundamentally sound. They're playing more aggressive. We're running the ball very well. We're passing the ball fairly well. I'd like to see us do a little better in the downfield passing game, given all the talent we have at wide receiver. But you know what? When we can pass it for 5 yards on a bubble screen and watch it go for 53 yards, it's hard to complain about the passing game.
Right.
And we've got receivers out there that are, 2 of our receivers have hit in that 22, 23 mile an hour range when they've gone running in Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. And we've got a quarterback that's top 22 mile an hour out there running, who, by the way, isn't some little guy. He's like a freaking truck. The guy's huge. I mean, so offensively, we've got a lot going with our ground game. Really excited about that. Defensively, and I've been preaching this, and we didn't look like it as much versus Marshall. I'll be the first to admit it. But guys, we've got a great starting defense that should be, if not the top, one of the top 2-3 defenses in the country. And I think our second team could go out and be a top 10 defense in the nation. It's that good. We are so deep. And that's the difference, I think, between Ohio State and a lot of teams is their depth. I mean, you look at this. We've got guys who could be starting most places. Arvell Reese, great linebacker who's in our 2 deep. Caden Curry and Caden McDonald along that our defensive line. Hero Canoe, Kenyatta Jackson, absolute beast. We had people trying to steal him away, offering him all kinds of money during the offseason because he's in the 2 deep. You go right on down. Our 3 deep consists of Edric Houston, who is one of the best edge rushers coming out of high school in this year's class. So we are stacked at every position. The biggest concern for us, guys, is one that you guys, I think, really don't have a whole lot of concern at, and that's tight end. Man, what I wouldn't give to have your tight end right now, because that would leave this team with absolutely no holes. I swear.
Right.
I'll
trade you your entire second team defense for Jack Belling.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. We got to keep that depth because, as you guys have found out this season, that injury bug can really bite you.
Oh
Yep.
man.
You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, I mean that's the strength of this defense, or the strength of this team overall, is the depth. I mean, again, we go 6 deep at wide receiver easy. Quarterback, we got 5 guys in our quarterback room. 2 of them were top 5 freshmen this year. You know, so yeah, I mean it's a great time to be a Buckeye, and this is an exciting time because we really are in a national championship or bust season.
Yeah, I would say so too. You touched on a lot that I want to touch on.
Yeah.
Starting with the injuries, what how does that look like for you guys this week? Any major concerns? True impact players that'll be out.
Well, thankfully we got our All-American offensive lineman and Donovan Jackson back last week, and man, it made a difference. I didn't think our offensive line was going to get a whole lot better, but it was a completely different offensive line. They were out there just having their way with Marshall, who, you know, a lot of people don't think a whole lot about Marshall, but they got a pretty good edge rusher in Green. This is an NFL caliber edge rusher that they've got. And with the exception of one bad play by our right tackle, Josh Fryer, that offensive line was amazing last week. Injury-wise, our biggest concern will be, is Tyleik Williams back this week? Our big defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams, redshirt junior. The guy is an absolute beast. Hogs up the middle of that field, really big run stopper. A defensive tackle that can get penetration and get to the quarterback. And I think that was a big part of our struggles last week, was being without him. The thing is, when you've got guys like Hero Canoe, Jason Moore, Taiwan Malone Jr., Kane McDonald behind them, I understand he's a great player, probably a day 2 draft pick, but man, you cannot have a layoff like that. You just can't. And that was, I think, a big part of our slow start.
Right.
And
Yeah,
if they have a slow start against the Spartans, given their talent offensively, are going to be able to put up some points. So that's my big concern would be, is if Tyleik's back or not.
yeah, I think it's safe to say that all of us here are hoping for that slow start outcome because the past few years have not been slow starts. You touched on Will Howard a little bit, and I want to get your thoughts on him a little bit deeper. Obviously, coming over from Kansas State, in the same breath, how has he been able to mesh with what Chip Kelly's doing? Obviously, that was a huge get for both of those. But wanted to see where you stand on Will Howard and how things have been looking in the new offense.
I really like Will Howard. He's come in. He's been very efficient. If you look, he is completing nearly 69% of his passes, 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's only been sacked 1 time in 3 games. He is a big guy who can extend plays with his legs. He's very smart. He does not make the bad play. We've had great quarterbacks in the past, and one that comes to mind is Justin Fields, who his biggest issue was he would always try to do too much. And a lot of times he would end up resulting in a sack or a bad play of some sort. Will Howard's just that smart, got that NFL mentality of, you know what? The play's not going to happen. We're going to chuck it out of bounds. We're going to live for the next down. We're going to come out and make it up there. And that's huge because, as you guys know, football comes down to who makes the fewest errors a lot of times. And when you've got a small quarterback, or when you got a smart quarterback who is not worried about his stats and trying to do too much and just wants to go out there, read his team, and win ball games, man, it makes things great. And that's what Will Howard is. I said at the beginning of the season when we brought this guy in, he didn't have to, given this roster, he didn't have to really go out there and win games. He had to go out there and manage games and not lose games. And that's where we're at with him. Now, there may come a time where he has to do something to win a game. I think he's going to be up to the task. He's very confident. Something that I think we lacked with the starter we had last year in McCord. But, you look at him coming in, you might have thought there would have been friction. Devin Brown, of course, being an incumbent. We had Lincoln Keenholz in there. Julian Sane, and it comes in as a transfer. Aaron Nolan comes in as a freshman. This was already a stacked room. But Will Howard came in and just took control of that room.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys work well together.
Yeah.
And they push each other, they challenge each other. And I think it's going to make not only Will Howard a better quarterback, but the rest of those guys behind him a better quarterback. Now,
Certainly.
If I had one concern in the quarterback room, it's that, Devin Brown's our number 2 guy right now. On a personal level, I think Devin Brown is an amazing guy. He shows amazing character. I don't know that he's the solution to number 2. I personally feel we should be putting Julian Sane in there, getting those snaps. This guy's very likely the future of our franchise next year. So, but other than that, the quarterback situation is great.
It sounds like think that Howard is a pretty significant upgrade over McCord.
Absolutely.
I think seems like the Buckeye fans patience proved pretty thin with him after that Michigan loss last year.
Well, if you look, you go back and we broke it down. He was named the starter at the beginning of the year, and people questioned it. They thought Devin should have had the job.
Mm-hmm.
Even Ryan Day came out later and said, right up until the very end, Devin Brown was leading that competition. We don't know what exactly happened that pushed it over the edge for Kyle McCord. But then he comes out, he has some pretty decent games. But the big thing was he had that game versus Notre Dame that he won.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was sold at that point at how good of a leader he was. What a great quarterback he was. But, we went down and broke down that film after the game. Man, Notre Dame should have won that game. We looked at that. Notre Dame had Ohio State in that game. They go out there. There was at least 2 pickoffs that should have happened on that final drive.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, Freeman only fields 10 guys on the winning touchdown play.
Yeah.
So many mistakes that Notre Dame made. Ohio State didn't win it. Notre Dame lost it at the end. And I hate saying that as an Ohio State fan, but it's facts.
Yeah.
So, this is a tremendous upgrade over what we had last year.
Yeah. You mentioned that Notre Dame game last year. I feel like we're used to seeing Ohio State play in at least one of these big time games early on in the season. So with that, do you have any concerns with heading into a game like this on the road, the first time they're leaving Columbus, really only having Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall under your belt? Do you think that some teams may revel in that situation to finally get in that big game? Any concerns on your end as a fan?
I've got a lot of confidence, but at the same time, I think you always have to have some concern when your first road game is a Big Ten game. It's going to be a nighttime game up there in East Lansing. Before we came on, I ran some interesting numbers by you guys that, I was researching. Like I said earlier, this series is Ohio State's pretty much owned it at 37-15, but 10 times in those 15 wins, the Spartans have knocked off a ranked Ohio State team 5 times when they've ranked within the top 5 teams in the country. So logically, there's got to be some concern given that soft schedule. And honestly, given a little bit what we saw versus Marshall last week, given the struggles we had with a mobile quarterback, and he was not a real mobile quarterback, but he was a guy who, when they spread it out, he could extend plays, he could take off for a run, he could throw the ball downfield. But I look at that, and I look at the guy you got up there in Childs, and this is a guy with a lot more talent than what we saw out of this young man at Marshall. And believe me, the kid had heart. We kind of joked on our podcast Sunday when we were giving out our Buckeye leaves that maybe the defensive player of the game should have been the turf for taking the kid out, because in that first half he was keeping Marshall competitive. So yeah, I mean, obviously coming into your house, facing a mobile quarterback with good arm talent, and a guy who I personally think is an extraordinary coach in Jonathan Smith, I'm going to have a little concern. I'd be a fool to not have some concerns.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What as we head into this game, what's one matchup, whether it's specific players, corners on receivers, or whatever, maybe one matchup that you're looking forward to most?
For me, man, I like the wide receivers versus the defensive backs. It's a good one, but I think it all comes down to the big uglies. I really want to see what I think is an improved and very effective Michigan State defensive line versus our offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it earlier. Your defense has 15 sacks, 10 of those coming by the defensive line. This is going to be the best defensive line we have faced thus far this year. It's a defensive line that I think is going to be this can be a measuring stick game for us as far as just how good is our offensive line. Yes, we might play some that could be better. I'm not going to say we won't. Obviously, when I think of defensive lines in this conference, I mean, you're hard pressed that if Michigan has a healthy defensive line along that front with guys like Graham up there, they are probably what has been the last year or two and will be this year a measuring stick defensive line. But they're not deep. That's the great thing. As I looked and reviewed through some of your numbers and watched some of the tape from your games, you guys can rotate guys in and out, just like Ohio State can. Michigan can't do that. They don't have that depth. They don't have that. We said it from the beginning of the year. That's a team that's one or two injuries away from being a 500 ball club at best.
Right. Yeah.
And I look at this. So I look at a Michigan State defensive line that can push our offensive line, that's going to hopefully bring the best out of our offensive line. And if our offensive line stands up to that defensive line, which I think you guys will keep fresh, using a rotation. And the other thing is, you've got a guy in your defensive coordinator who came over from Minnesota who knows the Buckeyes, who knows the Big Ten. So it's not like somebody coming in fresh off the street. So he's going to know the kinds of things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that matchup right there determines the ballgame. If Ohio State can keep your guys out of the backfield and open up the holes, the Buckeyes are going to have a real good game. If we have Will Howard running for his life, we'll literally lace up them boots because it's going to be a long day in East Lansing. And it's going to be one of the slugfests. And I'll tell you what, and I mentioned it during our show earlier, the one place you don't want to find yourself with Michigan State is in a close game as the clock's winding down. Because this I will say, and you can ask our friend Jim Harbaugh, you don't want to give these guys a chance at the end.
No, that's true. That's true. We've certainly seen that a couple times. You talked a lot about the expectations for this team and
Yes.
obviously how talented they are and all the depth they have. And I think all of us could probably agree they're in a national championship or bust situation. Mm-hmm. What is the one thing that keeps you up at night, or that worries you, or the one thing that you feel that could derail this season? Obviously, there's the obvious ones like injuries, things like that. But what's the biggest concern with this team that you think, oh man, when we get up against Georgia or an Alabama or one of these other top teams, that's going to be a problem, if any?
There's really two. There's two things that really have concerned me. One is our tight end play on the offensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Our tight ends have not made themselves a presence They're decent in blocking, but not great. But they really haven't made a presence as far as making an impact on the offense catching the ball. When you come up against top tier defenses who have lockdown corners, who might be able to slow down Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Egbuka or Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, whoever's out there at the time. If you have lockdown corners who can slow them down, especially a good physical bump and run corner, and you have to depend on those tight ends to catch those passes. Right now, I'm not sure we're in a real good position there. We haven't seen a good chemistry between Howard and the tight end yet. We're missing on some throws when he does target it, but we're just not seeing him targeted a whole lot either. Defensively, if there's one thing that I saw in the Marshall game that gives me concerns, it is our linebackers. In a 4-2-5 set like we're running, you need extremely smart, athletic, and physical linebackers. Now, our linebackers are very physical. They are very athletic. But we've got a guy in Lorenzo Styles who's just learning the position for the first time. We have a guy in CJ Hicks who comes in to spell him a lot. We also have a very good linebacker in Cody Simon, but he's somebody who is really just in his first year of starting. Against Marshall, we saw these guys take some bad angles, be out of position. We saw some guys miss some tackles. So I think our linebackers are going to get there, don't get me wrong. And it's going to take a good portion of the season to get there, I think, because they are still learning new positions. But right now, as I look at our immediate schedule, and not to be disrespectful, I look at that game that's coming up in Eugene, Oregon.
Sure.
And are these linebackers going to be ready?
Yeah.
Because if they're not, Oregon's got the type of talent that will exploit it.
Yeah. Yeah, that team in Eugene, I think, is going to be a tough matchup for all the Big Ten teams for years to come.
And you guys get them the week after you get us.
Yeah, it's
Not
just
even the whole week.
Friday
night.
We talked about
Friday night.
6 days.
And I'm trying to. Do you guys have to go to Eugene, or are they coming to you?
We're going.
Believe, yeah.
So you've got to play Ohio State on
We're going to
a
Eugene.
late night Saturday, and then turn around and go to Eugene on a Friday night. You said?
Yeah, it's a Friday night
Yeah,
game.
what's the worst that could happen?
Well, we talked about how the schedule when we recorded the schedule makers did not do you guys any favors this year.
Mm-mm.
I mean, that's just
Nope.
mean what they did to you guys with that stretch.
Yeah, it's not great. You've been really generous with your time, Chris. A couple more things I want to get. I want to get a prediction, of course, but one thing you hit on pretty early that I wanted to talk to you about was the Ryan Day job security. I think being in the whole Michigan State rivalry, we get drowned in what we call the blue wall media. In Michigan, they love their Michigan football. Michigan can do no wrong, and Michigan State can do no right. Ohio State can do no right. So I think for years we've been hearing about Ryan Day on the hot seat, and I can't even fathom what. I mean, I get that you don't beat Michigan 3 years in a row. That's tough, but 39-3 against the Big Ten speaks for itself. You're talking about a guy that's won 59 games or however many it was in 5 or 6 years. I guess I just thought that was all rubbish. Like I didn't know that in Columbus the feeling was the same.
So first of all, you guys aren't big friends of ScamWeb and the Michigan media?
No.
No.
It's so unbelievable.
Anyhow, yeah, it is a real thing, and there's going to be some people that agree, some people who disagree. But you look at this, and you've lost to your rival 3 years in a row. The reason, even though he's got this great record, the reason that this is such a real thing for people in Columbus is, and I'm not sure any of you were old enough to remember living through the John Cooper years, where we saw a team that should have won at least a minimum of 2 national titles, but was frequently stopped. Actually, you guys got us one year. You guys kept us out of the national title game in '98.
Nice.
But Cooper's record, 2-10-1 versus versus Michigan.
Yeah, that's not
And-
good. That's not going to cut it.
And that's not going to cut it. And Ryan Day has been monikered as Cooper 2.0.
Oof.
Now,
Ooh.
It's
Cooper
tough.
was a great recruiter. Cooper was a great coach, except when he was playing Michigan. Except when he got into bowl seasons. And right now you look and that's a lot of where Ryan Day is at.
Mhm.
So this is very real. The people of Columbus are not willing to live through another, 13 years of John Cooper.
Right.
So yeah, this is a real thing, this concern. Now, what solves that cure? There's 2 things. One, when the NCAA finally gets on the ball, delivers those sanctions,
I was hoping you'd
and
say that.
and I do believe they will, and vacates those wins. All of a sudden, I still, and this is what's bad. And I hate talking about these guys. I hate it with a passion. But
That's all right.
Can I give
You're
you?
on the right
can I-
show for it.
I mean, I want to be 100% honest. I don't think they needed to cheat last year.
Oh,
I
we
really
said the same
believe-
thing.
I really believe last
Yep.
year they were legit a national title contender, if not the best team in the nation.
I agree.
So for them to cheat last year was unfathomable. And what it did was it took away the credibility
Yep.
of every player on that team. The
Mhm.
coaches sacrificed the credibility of the program and the players to serve their own needs. And let's call it. It was done because Jim Harbaugh knew if he didn't do it, just like when he called off the game in 2020
Mhm.
because somebody on the basketball team had COVID. Just like when he did that, he knew he was going to be fired if he didn't. That's what led to this whole
Yeah.
cheating thing. Make no mistake about
Yep.
it. And
Absolutely.
the NCAA, they move slow. They move very slow, guys.
Mhm.
But more and more information is coming out. There's also, let's not forget, there's also an FBI investigation going with this.
Yeah.
There's-
Yep.
Might be multiple.
They're gonna come down with lack of institutional control. Make no bones about it. Ward Manuel is going to be out. There's going to be vacated wins. But until that happens, Ryan Day has one simple solution.
Yep.
Go out there and knock the crap out of them.
Mhm.
Just take them and absolutely destroy them bit by bit. In 2020, we had this whole saying we were going to hang 100 on them. Guys, this is the year to hang 100 on them. It really
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
So that is what will save Ryan Day, is going out there, being his rival, getting that monkey off his back, and winning a national title.
Yeah.
Those 2 things, he goes from a guy on the hot seat to, I think, a contract extension the same day.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe Jonathan
Yes,
Smith can
very much.
join in on that first part at least.
Yeah, we could really use a big win. We haven't had one in a while. But with that, obviously want to get your prediction on the game. Give me a score, thoughts, how the game goes Saturday night in East Lansing.
Well, I'm like I said, I've got concerns, but I am very confident that the Buckeyes can come in there and do what they're coming in to do. I don't think it's going to be as easy as the games have been. I think that Michigan State's defense is legit. I'm going to say that this is going to be. I'm going to say it's going to be Ohio State 38, Michigan State 17. But guys, here's the part that I'm going to hit you with. I think this is a touchdown or less game until midway through the third quarter. And that's where I think
we could all
that,
combine
that
that.
massive depth
Yeah.
just kind of takes over.
Yeah.
I'd take that, honestly.
Be the biggest
Yeah.
win since the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about it on your show, Chris. That would be honestly a pretty big step forward for this team. I mean, especially with the new coach and what we've seen in this game the past 6-7 years. It just hasn't even. It's been over before. I mean, first quarter some years. So just to be in the game in the third quarter would be such a bright spot.
And guys, hang with this guy. I really think Jonathan Smith is the answer. You know, you got a very, very tough schedule this year. It may not end up the way you want it to, but hang with the guy. I think he's a great coach. I think he's, he reminds me a lot of Mark D'Antonio.
Yep. Yeah.
He's a gritty guy, very football smart guy. I think you guys got a keeper up there. I just hope he doesn't end up having the success against Ohio State that D'Antonio did, because D'Antonio gave us fits for a while there, guys.
Yes, yeah. We certainly missed those days, but
He was a thorn in our side.
Yeah,
I will say we are inducting him into our Ring of Honor on Saturday.
Are you
during
really?
halftime.
Yeah.
So
See, that makes me want to go because we all know he was an Ohio State guy at one point.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
That makes me kind of wish I were there.
Yeah. Was he on that national championship staff?
he was.
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
Talked about changing the strategy at the end.
That's
Yes.
right.
Using
I
the
saw that
Hurricanes,
the other day. Yep. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. And before we let you go, obviously want to give you a chance to let everyone know where they can find you and any upcoming special shows or anything like that you got going on.
Well, every show we got special. We're just that dang good.
Yes.
But we're on most of the podcast formats, obviously. Spotify, X. We're on YouTube. If you don't want to watch our beautiful faces, you can always catch the audio versions everywhere. But we do 2 to 3 live shows a week usually. We have a live call-in show every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Not doing that this week because Eric's out on the road. And quite frankly, I'm just not tech savvy enough to run that board just yet to do the call-ins. We do a live roundtable show every Sunday night where people can join us in the chat. We've been doing some post-game shows as well, live call-in post-game shows. I don't know if we're going to do that because it's going to be a pretty late night after we wrap this one up, but who knows? Depends on how spry our man Eric is feeling when he gets back. But yeah, check out the OHIO podcast on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, the OHIOpodcast.com. We do a lot of great writing on there. Eric, myself, our friend JR, we put articles up there daily pretty much, usually multiple times a day. So if you prefer the written word to our docile tones or our ugly mugs, you can catch us on there as well.
That's great. Well, there you have it, Spartan fans. The OHIO podcast. If you're ever looking for some Ohio State insight, also just general good college football knowledge. I've been tuning in a little bit this week, getting an idea of what's going on over there, and it's been really pleasant to listen to. Chris, thanks again. We really appreciate the time.
I appreciate it, guys.
Best of luck Saturday. You won't agree with this, but go green.
Go white.
Go white.
Wait, before we go, I'm just gonna say one thing. OH!
Let's just say screw blue. I think we can all
Yeah,
agree on
well,
that.
Okay.
Screw blue.
All right, screw blue. I'm with that. All right, guys. Have a great
All right.
night.
You too. Thanks, Chris.
Chris.
Bye.
All right, and that was Chris from the OHIO podcast. We obviously thank him for his time, and we'll catch everyone later on.